Welcome back to another episode of Espresso Chat, where we break down the topics shaping the life sciences industry. I'm your host, Casey Chestnut, and I'm joined once again by our resident life sciences expert, Massimo Crudeli.
Hey, Casey. Hello once again. Looking forward to another episode of our Espresso Chat.
Glad to have you back. So today we're going to be talking about testing, specifically how life sciences organizations are beginning to rethink testing and validation as they move from manual, time-intensive approaches towards more automated models. Testing is often one of the most resource-heavy and time-consuming phases of implementations or system change, especially in regulated industries. So in this conversation, we'll explore why traditional testing has become such a bottleneck, what automation could change, and what leaders should start thinking about now. Massimo, this is an area with a lot of momentum in the industry, and I'm excited to get your perspective. Thanks again for joining. So my first question for you, testing becomes a Okay, can we start over on this one? All right, let's start. All right, 43:10. Okay.
We should include a beep.
The bloopers, yeah. Okay, once more. Welcome back to another episode of Espresso Chat, where we break down the topics shaping the life sciences industry. I'm your host, Casey Chestnut, and I'm joined once again by our resident life sciences expert, Massimo Crudeli.
Hello, Casey. Nice to see you again. I'm very looking forward to another episode of our Espresso Chat.
Glad to have you back. So today we're going to be talking about testing, specifically how life sciences organizations are beginning to rethink testing and validation as they move from manual, time-intensive approaches towards more automated models. Testing is often one of the most resource-heavy and time-consuming phases of an implementation or systems change, especially in regulated environments. So in this conversation, we'll explore why traditional testing has become such a bottleneck, what automation could change, and what leaders should start thinking about now. My first question. Testing is often one of the longest and most resource-intensive phases of a life science implementation. From your perspective, why does testing become such a bottleneck, especially in regulated industries?
It's a very, very good question. My opinion, I think that testing is becoming a bottleneck in life sciences because it's not a quality check. It's a regulatory requirement. And the burden and the pressure is enormous. So every configuration, integration, workflow, calculation, report, role must be validated to meet FDA, EMA expectations for accuracy, traceability, auditability, data integrity, and so on and so forth. So and this is why testing is very important. Okay. Now, I think there are maybe 2-3 reasons why testing slows everything down. So number one, I think that the number and the volume of scenarios really explodes in GXP environments. You need to test pretty much everything that is GXP compliant or relevant. Manufacturing, quality control, supply chain, serialization, stability, master data changes. And for each process, you have a lot of scenarios and test paths or scripts. Okay, and because of the validation and because also on the potential impact on patient and product, testing cannot be selective. It has to be exhaustive. Yes, now the new computer software assurance is more risk-based than the old computer system validation, but still we are talking about a very large number of scripts and scenarios. Number two, life sciences company require documented proof. So you cannot just run the test, call it done. You also need to demonstrate the test was done, the test was passed, and you are in control. So each test execution must be logged, must be reviewed, must be approved, must be stored as part of the validation documentation. Okay, so the documentation effort, not only the test execution itself, is consuming a massive amount of time. And then you have, of course, the fact that because of the scenarios, because of the multiple scripts, testing now relies on cross-functional coordination. Okay, so you might run a script where QA must approve, something, and then the SMEs must validate the scripts, and then you also have involved other departments. So even scheduling all these activities creates delays and bottlenecks. Okay, so now testing is, I would say, 40%, 60% of implementation timeline in a regulated environment. We're talking about weeks. In some cases, we're talking about months for testing and validation of the systems. So, for example, what we have done as a STAEDEAN to kind of address this issue and challenge is to have a system that is built for life sciences that comes with GXP testing and validation accelerators, including an automated testing suite. Okay. Nowadays, these automation tools can compress months of work into days, and at the same time, they preserve, full regulatory traceability.
That's a big benefit to have, since most organizations still rely heavily on manual or semi-manual testing. What are the biggest limitations of traditional testing approaches when it comes to speed, consistency, and compliance?
I mean, manual testing is slow, of course. Sometimes it's inconsistent. Different teams, different people, they are testing. They have a different testing approach, if you will. And also, it's extremely difficult to scale in a regulated environment. Okay, so the speed problem is relatively simple. You have manual scripts, and then you have people to review it, people to approve it, people to run it, and that, if you multiply this by hundreds of scripts, and times, the fact that they have to rerun the scripts periodically, you can easily imagine, the amount of time. We're talking about weeks or months overall of work. The consistency problem is probably even more important. To people running the same scripts introduces variations. The sequence of steps, the way they interpret the scripts. So data changes. For example, I'm using one product instead of another. I'm using one customer instead of another. They might skip steps. So the human testing is by nature vulnerable to errors. And in GXP environment, inconsistency equal to compliance risks. And we are back to something that we discussed, a couple of months ago: FDA warning, FDA risks, exactly. And then you have kind of a compliance overhead. Manual testing requires evidence. You need a screenshot. You need a witness. Okay. Somebody running and somebody witnessing the test. Then you have review, and then you have approval, and you have signature and version control, both for preparing and maintaining the scripts and for executing the script. Okay, and sometimes if you look at the testing time, the documentation time, preparation, archiving, it's often longer than the testing time per se. It may take you a minute to run a script. It may take you a day to prepare this script. And then you have, consider, in a regulated industry, you test the system before go live, the initial validation, and then you retest the system every time, changes are introduced in the system. A new configuration, a new module, a new version of the system. And you need to repeat all of this over and over again. Okay, that's where companies kind of get stuck. It's too expensive. The time is too long. So we need to move. The industry must move towards automated solution. Okay, an automated testing and validation framework, because it preserves compliance while eliminating limitation of the manual testing.
I get it, yeah. At a high level, how can automated testing change the way life science organizations think about implementations, upgrades, and ongoing system changes?
I think that automated testing, if implemented properly, is very transformative for life sciences companies, because it will turn testing and validation from a bottleneck into an enabler of speed, resilience, and kind of a continuous improvement. Okay. With an automated testing, organizations can execute hundreds of cases or test cases in hours, not weeks. Okay. And you can also run script consistently every time. There is no issue with the scheduling conflict. There is no human error. There is no repeatability issue. Okay, UAT and validation runs, they can shrink in time dramatically. And because of that, automated testing tools, they will support a true continuous validation model. Okay, you don't have to freeze the system because of fear of kind of a breaking compliance. They can update, the companies can adopt updates, security patches, configuration changes, new features, and run this kind of a testing and validation processes automatically and almost instantly. Okay, this is very essential for cloud ERP. They update it periodically, but also for AI readiness. All these kind of new agents, you want to also test them, right? And then the automated testing tool per se, they can improve documentation quality. Taking screenshots, documenting the steps, logs of the test runs with the timestamps, and so they can be all aligned and all automatic. And also you reduce the dependency from SMEs. Okay, so the SMEs per se, the people, they are not bottlenecks anymore. What if, case is not available today to test the application? Well, I'm done. I need to wait for cases to come back. With an automated testing tool, this kind of a risk is eliminated automatically. And then at the end of the day, there is kind of a strengthened compliance. They can enforce consistency, auditability, visibility. So if a company implements an automated testing tool, they will transform testing from a painful, mandatory step in their product life cycle into a strategic advantage. They can move faster. They can gain confidence with whatever it is. They can implement new features, new modules, new configurations accurately in a repeatable way and according to kind of all the GXP, FDA, EMA guidelines.
Nice. For life science leaders planning ERP implementations or future upgrades, what's one thing they should start rethinking today when it comes to testing and validating?
I guess the biggest shift is to understand that testing is not something that happens at the end of a process, but it's something that you design and incorporate in your life cycle from day one. Okay, the traditional way of thinking was, I implement the system, at the end I test it. I build this process, at the end I test it. I change, I test. The shift, the modern approach is testing and validation in life sciences must be embedded into the implementation blueprint itself. Okay, you need to think validation and testing from day one. Okay, which means, for example, you build a reusable test library at the beginning. It's kind of in line with the process that you are designing. I'm designing this process. That's the way I will test the process. And you're creating your library. You define a standardized test data. You can rewrite this kind of a script as soon as the process is defined. you want to build a validation framework that can be replayed over and over and over again. So this is must be engineered, okay? And it's easier if you engineer this process at the beginning or as you progress to the implementation, rather than wait at the end and, at that point, try to figure out a way to test what you have implemented. If you do that, your fit gap analysis take less time. The configuration is more kind of a structure. You can test interfaces continuously. You have a go live readiness that becomes more predictable to the entire team. And also upgrades, they stop to being scary. That's a classic concern, complaint in life sciences about cloud solution. They update the platform every 3 months, every 2 months, every 4 months, and I need to retest the system. Yes, but in this case, testing is re-engineered in the process.
That's super helpful. So let's see, to wrap it up, if you had to leave viewers with one takeaway, what mindset shift should organizations make when it comes to testing in life sciences, especially as automation becomes more viable?
Oh, I would say definitely. Testing is not a burden, is not a cost anymore. Testing is an accelerator. Manual testing slows you down, for sure, limits upgrades, strains resources, QA, but also SMEs resources, and expose the company to potential compliance risks. Automated testing, on the other hand, unlocks speed, consistency, repeatability, scalability, and confidence. Okay, if a company can embrace, automated testing and validation, they're not only reducing the effort of these kind of processes, they are future-proofing their operation as they scale up, as they increase, the span of the ERP or IT platform. They can benefit from this automated testing. They can adopt new capabilities. They can respond to regulatory changes, for example, or they integrate new acquisitions smoothly. We talked in one of the past Espresso Chat about buying companies. Okay, you buy a company, you can implement the same ERP process. Of course, you need to test the integration and such, but you can do it in a more efficient way. So as life sciences becomes more digital, you also need to modernize the way you think about testing. Okay, testing must innovate. Cannot stay manual forever. So automation in testing is not a luxury anymore. There are some risks, some challenges, of course, but it's truly the foundation for the next generation of compliant and agile life sciences companies and operations.
Great. Massimo, thank you again for sharing your insights and for helping us think differently about testing and validation in life sciences. And thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of Espresso Chat. If you're interested in learning more about how life sciences organizations are rethinking testing, validation, and digital transformation, you'll find links below to explore our solutions and connect with us. Until next time, thank you guys for watching.
Thank you. Thank you.